Hello, hello! Today I will be bringing you a completely new ship, the Z-52, which is the Tier 10 German DD, German destroyer in that case. Now, these ships have very recently, as in today, been reworked, so I haven't had as much time to play this ship as I would like, but I will give you what I consider my first impressions and so far my opinion of the ships. It might change, but it's unlikely to change too much. I still have some builds that I wish to test, but so far I'm running a pretty default DD build, which involves running 15-point conceal, which with the help of the concealment module takes down the concealment to 6.4 kilometers, which is pretty good. It's not as good as what you can get on the Shimokaze or the Gearing, but it's miles better than what you can get, for example, on the Khabarovsk. So you will still be outspotted by the standard DDs, but you will outspot the Russian DD. And that kind of seems to be a pretty continuing trend where you don't quite reach the Gearing, but you're not quite as bad as the Khabarovsk. And you kind of tend to sit between those two continually. And that's kind of where they balance this ship. Now, torpedo-wise, actually, let's start with the speed first. With the speed boost, you can see I'm pushing 40 knots. It's 37.5 without speed boost, which is decently fast. It's not as slow as the Gearing. It's nowhere near as fast as the Khabarovsk. Once again, it's kind of between the two of them. Torpedo-wise, you only have 8 torps, 2x4, and they have the range of 10.5. Slightly better than the Khabarovsk, significantly worse than the Gearing, but they are very fast at 69 knots and they only have a 1.4 kilometer spotting range, which makes them better than the IGN DDs, or IGN Torps of course, but they only do 14.4k damage, so that means even with 8 of these you're unlikely to really kill most of the battleships in the game. Now, HE wise, pretty consistent, fast reload. I'm running the 3 million reload upgrade. And you can see it's a pretty good constant damage that it pumps out. I've of course activated Hydro, which is why I can still see him some duration in the smoke, and why I can spot the torp so early. Now, the Hydro is one of the things that was recently changed. These ships used to have the standard German Hydro with massive range, but that has been significantly nerfed to something like 4.6 or so, might have been 4.8 ship detection, but it has been significantly nerfed. It used to be the standard German Hydro, which has almost 6 km ship detection, but that has been significantly brought down. So that's one of the things that they have adjusted on this ship. Another thing that has been adjusted quite a bit is actually the smoke duration. Even the T10 smoke on this ship only lasts 77 seconds. Oh, and I just ate a 10k volley from a battleship, but I wanted to get my torps off. Of course, this ship though, however, unlike the Gearing, this ship only has 1.5k HE damage, but it does have 3k AP damage. So the potential AP damage is quite high, and as with this, you can see with this DPM, you can pump out fairly good AP damage. But just like with the Hindenburg, you are very reliant on ships giving you broadside. In fact, this has the standard German AP, which means it has very high damage and you have great AP DPM, potential AP DPM, but unless you get targets really giving you that full broadside, you're unlikely to be able to utilize it. This Shimokaze smoke I scavenged ran out, so I have to pop my own smoke, and as said, this doesn't last that long. The torps ran out, that's good, but for example, you can see the damage, how many shells I'm bouncing, and then as soon as it starts giving me broadside, the damage goes up significantly, suddenly 5k volley. And this is very much the same case which you have with the Hindenburg and Rune and other such German cruisers. It continues the same pattern of having high damage but very low penetration value and pretty big autobounce angles. So that is questionable. It's like a good comparison would be a Gearing except with AP focused. Torps of course reload fairly fast. I think it's 90-second reload, but it's more for the flooding. That once again 14.4k damage isn't really that much. The torps are great, don't get me wrong, but you're not going to have that huge impact you have with Fletcher or Gearing or Shima torps. But of course they are still a potent tool, and because you have well enough concealment and they're fast enough, you end up using them quite a lot. The guns themselves are 3x2 128mm guns, which means of course they benefit from both AFT and basic firing training. It looks like Yamato ate 3 of the torps. As you can see, it didn't have too much of an impact on him, even though he ate some on the nose where his torpedo belt doesn't help. But still, flooding and so forth it will give me a nice chunk of damage here. And of course, always worth using them. Just short cooldown means, well, short and short. Fairly short means that they will be up soon again. Now, the fire chance is very low. I think default fire chance was 6%. I'll correct it if that wasn't it. But the default fire chance is only 6%. Of course, unlike the Khabarovsk, you are able to stealth fire very, very well on this ship. If you use Concealment Expert, you can stealth fire from 10.2 kilometers. The T10 can stealth fire from a shorter range because it's got better concealment, but this one has a range of 14.5. With AFT, of course, buffing it. So you can stealth fire all the way from 10.2 to 14.5. So that is more than a 4 km bracket of stealth fire ability. In fact, you can even slot the 3 million range upgrade on the ship and get 16.8 km range, at which point, well, you can just spam across the map if you should so wish. But with these floaty arcs, it's not really that useful. And the HE is so small caliber, you really need to hit the superstructure to do any damage. As you can see here, you see how many shattered shells that don't hit perfectly right on the superstructure, even though that's exactly where I'm aiming. And of course, the low fire chance means that, well, I'm gonna be shooting this guy for a very, very, very long time. This is of course one of the things that has been heavily influencing me to potentially try the 3x4 build, because as you can see, the ship has great fire rate and it has pretty good arcs. No, not the floaty US arcs, and not really as good as the hub either, but once again somewhere in between. And these fairly decent arcs and very fast rate of fire, especially with the 3 million upgrade, has made me think that the 3x4 build could be quite strong on this ship. You'd give up some stealth, sure. Instead of 6.4, you'd be somewhere around 7.1 concealment, I think. Which, not the best, but not the end of the world either. I mean, it would be rougher to contest. You wouldn't be able to contest capture points the same way you can now. So unlike on the Khabarovsk, where switching to 3x4 isn't really that big of a loss because you don't have that much concealment to begin with, on the Z-52 it is a fairly big loss because you are a great capture point contester. Even if you don't have the concealment they have, you of course have your German hydroacoustic surge, which means that any knife fight where you manage to get close enough to them, you will win. Since you'll smoke up, pop hydro, you'll see them, they can't see you. But they can of course just run away from it, from the cap altogether. And you have to get close enough to actually be able to use it, which is a lot of free time for them to just shoot you. So it's hard to decide which is actually the best choice. As of now, I have been mostly liking this balanced build, aka not 3x4, simply because you're a bit of a jack of all trades, master of none. But the potential for the 3x4 build is certainly there. In fact, another thing that I've also considered is slapping the range upgrade on it, and instead of specking AFT, specking Demolition Expert for a slightly better fire chance, which might also be a viable build, because in that case you wouldn't actually be giving up too much range, and you wouldn't be giving up your concealment, but you're still gain some additional oomph to your fire, which might be actually quite strong. So that's something that needs to be tested. As I said, there's still plenty of builds that I'm looking forward to testing on this ship. Strength-wise, if someone were to ask me, in a straight-up fight against the Khabarovsk, I expect the Khabarovsk to win. Of course, if he plays it correctly, if he starts just kiting away and spamming me, his long-range HE will be stronger than mine, and if he angles as sailing away, then my AP will bounce. Against the Gearing, it's kind of weird because the Gearing happens to be fat enough that your AP is actually surprisingly good. The issue with this ship using AP against other DDs is that you tend to get a lot of overpens, which of course significantly limit your damage. but the gearing happens to be just fat enough, and if it doesn't angle, you can do some really heavy damage volleys on it. So this ship does really well against that ship in particular. The Khabarovsk is a bit of an issue. If he angles and such, well, you're gonna struggle quite a bit. So once again, the final balance numbers for this ship is hard to decide yet. Same thing, of course, with the long range spam. You see I'm stealth firing these. I'm getting some good fires now, but it's very RNG based since you only have 6% fire chance. So once again, Demolition Expert might change my perceived opinion of these, but I wouldn't call them... They were, before they actually adjusted the Hydro, I would straight up call this thing overpowered. Because you could just sail into a cap, and with your 6 km Hydro, you pretty much covered the entire cap with your Hydro, and you could just sit there in the smoke and kill anything and everything. So that was quite overpowered. But now that they've taken it down, it's easier to counterplay it, because you just have to make sure you don't go within that 4.8 km range or whatever it was. You just have to make sure you don't get in within that range, and you don't have any issues with the stealth fire. And if he smokes up, well, you can kind of outweight the smoke now, because once again, 77-second smoke only. That's the shortest duration smoke. Your smoke lasts a shorter time than both IGN and Russian smokes. So one of the shortest smoke at T10, absolutely. So everything can outlast it. Now, when I say going for the 3x4, another build that I've also been considering is potentially going manual AA. Now, the reason for this is because this ship actually has quite good anti-air, and all of the anti-air is actually at a long range. In fact, I think with AFT, the shortest range anti-air you have is 4.2, and the other two auras are 6 and 6. And if you happen to slot on the range to AA instead of the less dispersion module that also increases your torpedo turret travel, then you can actually get 7.2 km range on your AA, and combine that with manual AA, and I think this can be quite a strong air denial ship. So someone who happens to queue up a lot with carriers, this would be another alternative to the gearing. Less reliant on defensive AA, but still much kind of like the Akizuki with the 3x4 build. You are able to generate this quite strong long range anti-air aura. So there is potential, but ultimately I don't feel like this German line is adding too much special into the game. I mean, they took the German cruiser philosophy and they balanced the DDs based on that. They added Hydro as kind of a bonus, but there are still some issues. Here, for example, I tried to rush this Hindenburg. You see, he's not really angled that much. He's actually giving a significant amount of broadside to me, and I keep closing the distance, getting more and more broadside, and I'm shooting my AP. And the issue, of course, here is that all my AP is bouncing. In fact, even if I was shooting USDD AP here, even the US AP wouldn't be bouncing. In fact, sitting side by side to a Fletcher has been able to Citadel a Donskoy, whereas I was unable to Citadel him with my German AP. So here I'm in a situation where I notice, oh crap, I actually do 0 damage to this guy. So the AP is certainly not too strong if you angle against it, which is kind of the Hindenburg syndrome. Now this game that I showed as an example I ended up doing 176,000 damage, which isn't bad. Basic speed wise, me and my body topped the score, but not really too special overall. Looking at the damage, you can see fairly even between HE and AP, and in fact torpedoes. They're all fairly even, and then we have dot damage like fires and flooding, once again also fairly even. So as I said, a bit of a jack of all trades, but doesn't really seem to be a master of any. It's not the master of long range fire like the Kabais. It's not the master of close range like the gearing. It's not the master of a torps like the Shima. It seems to be somewhere in between all, and I'm undecided of how much I actually enjoy it as of now. Since this is my first commentary of it, I might as well comment on my build. Now, the straight up module upgrade here. It's just straight up upgrade. There's no options here. This Torpedo, for some reason, I added the T10 upgrade, which just gives you 2 knots of speed and 500 meters range. It changes nothing else, so just get it. Straightforward. Get the premium consumables you can afford. Priority is repair and smoke, of course, especially since it lasts such a short time. Upgrade wise, main armaments mod 1. Aiming systems, but once again here there is some option of maybe going to AA guns mod instead to increase it to that ridiculous 7.2 km range. As you can see, these long range auras, putting them on 7.2 could be quite strong, especially if you queue with a carrier, but with the scarcity of carriers, that's once again debatable. I currently use main battery mod for the faster reload. The turret traverses so fast that there's no need to use it, but gunfire control and instead specking demolition expert or AFT could be an option. But right now this is just a flat out increase in reload, because 11.5 second 180 degree turn time means you're never going to have any issues with turret traverse regardless. And of course propulsion mod, so you don't end up losing engine. Acceleration, since the rudder shift is quite good. The turning circle isn't the best one, but once again, not as bad as Kaba, not as good as gearing. Basic build, basic firing training, last stand, superintendent, advanced firing training, concealment expert as I explained, and 17 point goes to torpedo armament, and the final goes to basics of survivability. That's the 18 point. But here I have, as I mentioned a couple times, been juggling some ideas of running manual AA and demolition expert with the 3x4 build, or perhaps you would go to, you see this 49 damage, increase it to 7.2, then put manual AA on top, plus the other aura as well. With the air concealment you have, you could potentially become quite a nasty menace to any enemy planes in the area, especially since you tend to be quite deep in caps to begin with. So that is a potential build that I've been considering. Of course, there are other ones. For example, you might just go straight with the Khabarovsk build, which is, I can show it, everyone should know it by now, but the 3x4, which is demolition, AFT, and survivability expert, that's an option as well. So, plenty of potential options. I mean, do I want to change it or not, or am I happy? I'll have to explore this further, and I will come back to you with what will ultimately be my most recommended build. But this is my preliminary commentary of the upcoming T10. I hope you enjoyed it.